What we're going to do is dive into it. Basically, I welcome you, and this is one of my favorite subjects for a lot of reasons. Being in the business for about 35 years as a management consultant and running our consulting firm, Renard Moore and Associates, we're teamed up with GCAP on providing these services on behalf of Caltrans. Caltrans' strongest desire is to try to increase the highway construction component used with small businesses, DBEs in particular. And one of the things that we have found to be so effective is that in order to track your records and to maintain the financial systems, and ultimately if you're so lucky as to get into ongoing work, there's even something called an indirect cost rate that has very specific requirements. All of those things are achieved well by QuickBooks. And whether you're a beginner user or whether you've been around using it a lot, in our opinion, it seems like there's always features to look at. So one of the things we're going to do is just try to work our way through a bit and allow us to introduce you in a broad way to what's going on. We'll cover setting up your company and just some basic kinds of things. One of the things that we know is important is that we cover the whole agenda, and it's fairly long. We're going to be looking at setting up your preferences, and that's just very specific rules and regulations for your company. Chart of accounts is kind of like the main intersection diagnostic of how everything is collected and reported. It's kind of like the quarterback game plan, very much similar to what I'm sure New England used last Sunday. And we'll cover this. We'll also get a chance to talk about some special ways to group and sort out things called items, jobs, and classes. Very complex area. Some of you who have done QuickBooks probably haven't veered in this area, and this might be one of the areas you want to talk more about. So we'll introduce you to that today. As we go through it, there's some everyday transactions that we're going to talk about too. We're also going to talk about banking a bit because the relationships between your financial institutions is filtered through QuickBooks. QuickBooks becomes your general ledger. Those of you who are accounting oriented, you know that's the basis of which all transactions are recorded and reported. We're also going to look briefly, only talk about payroll. That's a very, very complex. And QuickBooks has a whole service that just does that. Very few individual companies are capable of doing this simply because of the potential implications. Reconciliations. What happens is once you have your vendors, you have bills that you pay, you have invoices you send out to customers, you have banks, you have payroll, you have to reconcile them. You have to make sure that all the pieces are fitting together and add up. And the advantage of QuickBooks or any accounting system that works like QuickBooks is that it allows you to take one entry and it feeds several reports, several databases, sub-databases, if you will. Reports are important. There's a number of them. Obviously, your P&L, your balance sheet, cash flow. There's just a whole host of reports, and we'll chat a bit about that. There's a couple of shortcuts we'll mention briefly, and there's always help menus to go into, find them if you don't remember them, and certainly modify them if you need. And then there's just a few odds and ends things we'll talk about as well. If you go into QuickBooks, you will come to a whole wizard of how to set it up. And there's certain information that you can put in that allows QuickBooks to expedite your whole setup process. And this easy step-up interview process is that, and you can see it takes you through it. It's a wizard. There's information about welcome. There's a company information. There's preferences. Start date has something to do with when the actual clock begins to track records for QuickBooks. There's certain things as your accounting year, et cetera, et cetera. Setting up your company, obviously your company name and address is big. Federal tax ID is very important. Obviously that's how, if you do your taxes, you can actually know and have that information. 1099s that go out, that tax ID number is put in for your part of that 1099. First month of the tax year and fiscal year, obviously some run on a calendar year, some run on a month other than December and January. The types of income tax you form, obviously if you're a sole proprietorship, many of you are sole proprietorship, you run the under your federal tax ID number, and that's okay. Your federal tax ID number is your social security numbers. Others of you are corporations, LLCs, etc. The type of business that you put into setting up your QuickBooks is pretty important because what it does, it gives a certain type of generic face to your business. For instance, if you're a service business, there's certain ways QuickBooks will set itself up. If you're a products business selling products, there's certain ways QuickBooks will set itself up. And if you do both, QuickBooks will try to handle that as well. Under company info, there's this service business thing. I just mentioned that. There's a whole sublist of what industries you're in. So the advantage is you just simply go in and click what that is. And that allows you to take a large step toward identifying how to set up QuickBooks is done automatically within QuickBooks. Under company info, there's a whole host of information you'll see as well. There's accounts that will be set up. All of these you recognize: service, business, automobile expenses, sales contributions. These are very important. Do you want to use these accounts? QuickBooks has account, and you can use those as the basis because they have worked for many businesses similar to yours. It just expedites things. These accounts vary by type of business select. So if you select a different type of business, the account list will vary. Types of businesses, just a whole host. I'm not going to read through them all, but usually you fit in one. A lot of you will be either contractors or A&E type firms. You do design work, you do construction work, and or you do planning work. And there's a whole host of types of businesses that show up when you're going through this wizard. There's a couple of coaching points that come up for expenses automatically associated, new accounts, how do things work, and you can go through that, and it helps to expedite your setup there. And then there's a certain priority levels and security levels. Administration has access to everything, but you can also set it up so people will have access to selective areas. You may have a bookkeeper that can only enter data but cannot take out data, or you may have somebody who can read a report but cannot change the data in QuickBooks. Very important factor to keep control and security within the company, and often it's not because of any concern of the individual. It's just a matter of minimizing the chance for error or duplication in that regard. The restricted users can create accounts only. They can print sometimes. They can create reports. They can edit and delete transactions. All of these are various restrictions for you to decide for your setup of QuickBooks. And I'll just mention now as well, QuickBooks is a wonderful product and service, but there are other products that do this same thing, and I think you'll find that whatever is applicable here has some parallel capability in other programs if that's what you use. The reason a lot of people use QuickBooks is that it's so widely used. There's a lot of ways to get experience and knowledge to expedite anything that you're trying to do. In this case, we're talking about excess, how Laura will be impacted. You can see she can create everything except for closing transactions here. She can also print, nope. And in some cases, there's no reports there. But so what she's doing is essentially creating purchase. She's inputting in that regard. Setting up your preferences, turns on features on and off. Basically what it does is allow your program to act a certain way that you have prioritized. Determines how your desktop looks, customize QuickBooks, how QuickBooks acts, but it always can be changed later. Your preferences include for inventory. A lot of you are not selling products per se, but QuickBooks is able to set up a full inventory and maintain your products that are in inventory, as well as your work in progress, as well as products that have been sold, cost of goods. So there's things to set there. Most of you will not have that, at least that's my initial thought based on work and the sign-in list that I see. Sales tax, if you do that with the products, obviously that would be there. Invoice format, you will use that. All of you are invoicing. I mean, that's why you're in business, right? So the idea is to get an invoice. You can tailor it. You can put your logo. You can kind of, make it look like you. But most important, it also allows you to make the columns and the information unique to you. But it pulls from elements of QuickBooks that you've already inputted, including the timesheet, expenses, etc. Payroll is another setting. A lot of you may not do that, or you may subcontract that out. Estimates, some of you provide estimates on jobs that you're bidding. So you provide the estimate, and then when it comes in, you have to match that estimate to your actual bill and invoice. And progress invoices are going to be used by most of you. You don't do the whole job and get paid. You get paid periodically. You'll also track time. I got to tell you guys, that's so key. It's a little bit of work because it tracks it by day, by job, there's so many ways to cut the information there, but what it does do is allow you to add it up and you have a good record. If you're going to have what they call an ICR, indirect cost rate with Caltrans or some other public entity, that's very important. Classes are just a very helpful way to get subsets of either your vendors or your customers or other types so that you don't have just one type, you have multiple types, and you could track it by a greater level of detail. You can track your bills and payments. There's reminders that come up. Just briefly, this is worth mentioning, accrual versus cash. A lot of you that are individuals have businesses, and when the money hits the bank, either going out or coming in, that's how you record the transaction at that time. Actually, what Caltrans and what most public entities want you to do is to track the revenues and the cost against those revenues, and that's called accrual basis. So the accrual system is different than cash basis. It actually, if you pay for a product this week but sell it next week or next month out of a period, they want those two costs, revenue and costs, in the same period. The attempt to do that is called accrual. So that's a quick answer. We actually have an accounting seminar that we teach on behalf of Caltrans, and we go into this in much more detail. So I would encourage you all who are more interested in this to look for the accounting seminar. Start date of the company books is important. You click the switch. From then on, you should track everything. Prior to that, you can enter it in bulk or leave it out and just have it on hard copy or some other form. This is very important to the integral works of your accounting system. And what that is that for every income and every expense, you have to have account numbers that you charge transactions to that allows you to roll up the information in a way that does a number of things. One is acceptable for generally accounting principles, which the accounting world requires, and your tax consultant and accountant will require. It's also important to let your customers be assured that it is accurate, because they only want to be charged expenses relative to their project. So these things in the chart of accounts is a long list of items, and we're just going to shoot through this now, but the federal ITax number and using accounts receivable are key components, because once you bill something, it's a receivable. Then you collect it. Maybe the same month, may not be. Very important, and your chart of accounts have to track that. Your expense accounts, likewise, it can be general or specific as you want. Your accounts payable, eventually, whoever your vendors are, they owe you the money, they got to get it to you, and you'll mark it as paid. There's sub-accounts sometimes that you want to do. The capabilities are there. It allows you to assign each of your accounts in your chart of accounts if it is a tax implicable expense. If it implicates your taxes, you want to know that, and there's ways to trigger that within the preferences that are going. There's a whole active and inactive capability, so you can turn things off and on. I'm going to push each of you and say, I recommend highly that you all use account numbers, not just account names, with your accounts. Over the 30 some odd years we've been doing it, every client that said, no, I prefer the words, ultimately have gone to account numbers as well, so that you can refer to an account in two ways, not just one. A couple of things you need to have on hand: customers' names, amounts you owe them, vendors' names, start date, bank statements ending, value of the assets, liabilities, a whole host of checklists necessary just to set it up. If you don't have it, you can still set up QuickBooks, come back later and put it in. Customers who owe you money as part of your beginning balances, because if QuickBooks is going to track how much they owe, they got to know how much they started off at that start date. Remember the start date we talked about? You have to know what the balances are for your accounts, both vendors as well as customers, as well as credit cards or whatever, if you're going to track a live balance on a daily basis, and QuickBooks can do that. Vendors you owe money to, etc., balance sheets, accounts. Opening balances for customers, we just talked about that. You just want to make sure you know that you're going to be tracking jobs. You have to track what payments may have been done, may not have been done, information about new and other customers that you owe money, all those balances, so that when you add and subtract over the course of each month, that the ending balance is accurate because the opening balance was accurate, as well as each transaction within the period of consideration. Opening balances for vendors, you can enter the balance in the QuickBooks, you can mat them up. Pretty straightforward stuff, but you need to know the opening balance as we just discussed. Entering the opening and beginning balances, you got your credit cards, credit lines, bank accounts, assets. These are all the things that you enter in. Once again, if you don't have it all, that's okay. It seems overwhelming, and I don't want anyone to, oh, I'll never get that done. How will I do that? Yeah, it sounds like a lot. But what you do is you start small, you do some of the major ones, and then you begin to catch up. It's best if you do it all at once, because then you got it down. But if that isn't the case, you want to work it as you can. Adding items, jobs, and classes. Once again, QuickBooks tries to give you a degree of detail that you feel is necessary for your company. One guy may want one level of detail, another one may want 3 levels drilling down further. So for items, you can look at it for services, inventory, and your other charges. You can get different levels by just adding items to each of these areas, and it allows you to group, just for sake of a quick example, if you were looking at parts, you may have some sub-assemblies and you may have double sub-assemblies. So if it takes a widget and a mat to make up a carburetor, then the sub-assembly or the items can be the widgets and the mats, and then they can roll up to one carburetor. I know those names sound weird, but I think the point's clear. Subsets of a larger data world, items. Same thing can be done for jobs. Obviously, you can have a client. You may have multiple jobs. You may have a job blue, and you may have a job green. And within that job blue, you may get, somebody asked earlier, a change order that adds something else. Well, you can track the multiple jobs and the status of each job and subset within QuickBooks. Classes is very powerful. It gives you a number of ways to modify lower levels of detail. You can go by department, even if you have multiple offices or locations. You may have a headquarters and you may have a job site at the site of construction. You could have separate properties. You could have other general. There's other income and expenses you may want to item out by classes. Um, some of my clients actually take income and divide their profit center into classes so they can roll income up by each of the individual profit centers. Let's say if there's 4 and see profit by a class, and they will have that for each of the 4, and then that can roll up to total income. Same thing on expenses. There's some everyday transactions. Most of you who are new to QuickBooks, this is kind of important to you. Those who have done it 1,000 years, obviously you're more familiar with it. But let's just roll through it for the sake of those that are new. Adding customers and vendors, you can all add it once or as you need it. Information can be added through customer and vendor lists or when entering transactions. What this is saying here is that there's multiple ways to add in information. So if you didn't do it at once, for instance, you can go through and add all your customers at once. Boom, 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 boom. But if you come up with the new customers, you can actually do it through your vendor list, or you can do it while entering a transaction. You could enter the transaction and say, here's a check, try to put in a name that's not in there, and they say, well, do you want to add a name? And you say, yeah. And then they'll say something like, well, you want to just put their name in there quickly, or you want to add in all their information. So what QuickBooks tries to do in any good accounting system like this does, it gives you multiple ways to get the same information in. So it minimizes the hassle of trying to do everything at once, and if something's not complete, it minimizes the time it takes to get it complete. Never update name information when saving transactions. That's just a little quirk that I would mention, but it is an important one, because if you change the name, then QuickBooks is confused. It doesn't know who you really meant, and you'll see that come up from time to time. Invoices and statements. Obviously, invoices are important for you guys. There's templates in QuickBooks, and they're pretty good, and they're customizable. So you can do that and modify it the way you want, and then you can have multiple invoices, and it'll pull information. It'll pull time for hours. It'll pull expenses, just a whole host of things, and it's really good. And they can be emailed. Everyday transactions, if you look at the various screens, this is a good example of one for the, as you're going through it. This is the invoice, this is the client, and you know who you are, you're sending it to. This is the kind of work and the itemization that will be taking place down here. There's tons of information about invoice numbers so that you can track it and later pull it up by reports if you want, either for a client or for a company or for a class. Number of flexible ways of doing things. And what this does is helps you to manage your business. It helps you to understand how invoices, how accounts payable, how customers are behaving. Credit memos and returns, you guys may or may not have a lot of that. Sales receipts, you may or may not have a lot of that. I hope you have a lot of these. Received payments, the idea is that you want to match the payment against the invoice. Got paid in full, got paid in total, he paid in advance. All of those capabilities are within QuickBooks. If he paid on multiple checks, you know, there's a whole way of trying to handle just about every situation that comes up. One of the decisions you will make is that, do you enter your bills into QuickBooks, and then when the checks come in, the checks come against the bills. Some people get, I'll be honest, a little lazy and they don't. But I understand it. You guys are busy making money, running your business. Sometimes you get pushed. But this is a very important area about entering the bills. Writing checks, pretty easy because you can actually write the check and then print it through your printer simply from QuickBooks directly. But at the same time, that information is entered into your general ledger. Somebody had asked about purchase orders earlier. There's your answer. The capabilities there, you can understand how it works. You can also give out estimates, what is going to be for your proposal for your job, you estimating, and then it comes in, and you can track the estimate against the actual contract amount against the actual paid amount. So that whole cycle is potentially there. Receiving items and adjusting inventory if you have products coming in. A lot of you won't have that, but that allows that as well. Memorize transactions just allow you not to have to type in what you've already typed in, last pay period. It's just a transaction that you do often, and you just have QuickBooks remember it. Reminder says, hey, look, I got to pay so-and-so bill. It's just a tickler file. You can find transactions. You can sort by check number, date, amount, vendor. There's a whole lot of ways to find things you're looking for. Voiding versus deleting, kind of important concept. Sometimes if you write a check, you're going to void it because you still want the check number there and certain information. If you just put it in twice and it only belonged once, you just delete it because the other one shouldn't have been there anyway. Backup and store and restore is there. They have several capabilities. You can back it up and pull it out as you need in case things blow up. Or hopefully it won't happen, but if something were to happen to your main file because your computer was contaminated, there's backup storage, and if you're doing backup off of your computer, you just go back to your backup, pull that up. Banking. You make deposits, you make fund transfers, bank fees, insufficient funds. Well, hopefully we don't have that too often, but we all have had it. Credit and credit card purchases, journal entries. All of these things happen and get recorded in QuickBooks. They have their own unique way of getting recorded, and it allows you to track each of these individually, collectively. There's a lot of ways of getting this information, but all of this is processed through your accounting system called QuickBooks. Payroll. QuickBooks has a payroll service. Most people find out that if you're doing payroll, that means you have employees, you have to do deductions. That is such a meticulous area. Somebody other than yourself will do it. It is very laborious. Do it if you can. You can do it in-house, but you have to get it right. One of the things I would share with you, having been a management consultant as long as I have, you don't want to get this one wrong because the owner of the firm owes that money always, even after bankruptcy. You don't want to get the deductions and your reports wrong. That part you want to get right. That's why a lot of people use QuickBooks, they use Pay, they use Act. I mean, there's a whole host of programs. People do this a lot now. So the idea is if you do it in-house, make sure you're staying up. You have somebody who's specializing because there's a lot of updates, I won't say monthly, but probably quarterly, and you want to make sure you're on top of that. There's employee defaults, there's void checks and paychecks. Employee time comes in there. There's a whole timekeeping system within QuickBooks, and obviously you want to make sure that's being used and consistent with any of your payroll accounts. Journalizing payroll, paying payroll liabilities, summarizing data in Excel. Obviously, these are major functions. We're not going to spend a lot of it. It's very detailed. Most services do it themselves. If you do it, power to you. Keep doing it. Make sure that when you enter it, it's consistent with timesheets and other records within QuickBooks. Reconciling accounts. There's a lot of accounts you have. Let's start with the two big ones, cash, bank accounts and credit cards. You want to make sure that at the end of the month that your statements match with what you think you owe and you actually charged. And there's reconciling ways of doing that. You can do that on a total basis. You can do that on an item by item basis. Credit cards, same way. There are financial institutions behind those, and you can track those credit cards individually as well. Reports. What QuickBooks does, it allows you to take your general ledger information and pull it all together, and then, vernacular, spit it out in a way that you want to see it, that's useful in managing your company. So what it does, it has a couple of ways of displaying this profit and loss statement. And the details behind it gives you a specific period. There's a drop-down menu to expedite it. You can go month to date, year to date, quarter to date, whole year. This accrual versus cash basis is right there. Somebody asked a question, well, what if I've been cash? Is that going to be accrual? Yes, you can just, this is the switch, one of the report switches we were talking about. But you also want to check some other things. I find some people think, oh yeah, well, I can just switch it and there's nothing different. That could be the case, but it may not. And I just warn you, just based on my experience. If you want to filter in or out certain transactions, you can do it through here. You can print it with nice fonts and numbers and headers and footers. The kind of reports that you'll find are pretty extensive to the use that you'll need. The company financial reports, AR is accounts receivable, AP is accounts payable. Just literally, and you can ask, what do people owe me for the month of June? Or what do I owe others for the last quarter? Or what's my balance for Joe Blow pipe supplier? These are reports built into the system. All of those have vendors, they have names, and there's ways of pulling them up. Employees and payroll reports, we've talked a bit about that. Budget reports take actual data and gives you reports about the performance of the company over a historical period. But it also allows you to take that budget, create a forecast for a coming quarter or year, and then estimate what your business will do if the trends were to continue as they did in the historical period. Cash flow is very important. The difference, I'm going to just take a second here to talk about cash flow. There's a difference between earning money and having money. And the way I like to refer, and my students often have said, well, if I'm earning money, I'll always have money. Well, that's not necessarily the case. And the reason is because of this phenomenon called cash flow. What inevitably happens is that you can bill something in January, and you could pay for the cost of that project in January. But if you are earning that income 2 months down the road in March, there's no revenues against those expenses in January. Recognizing that is what cash flow addresses. Where is my money? Where is it going? How much do I have on hand? Very important analysis. There's a cash flow report built in to QuickBooks. One of the things a lot of us like to do is that we love QuickBooks, but boy, we sure like to go back to that basic Excel and just see it on a spreadsheet. It allows you to export your files, your profit and loss, your balance sheet, and various reports to an Excel file so you can actually see it and maybe even manipulate it off and out of QuickBooks. You can also print, not only your checks, but you can print your 1099s at the end of the month. Like for now, 1099s were due January 30th, so a lot of you have probably just gone through that. Some of the shortcuts, you can make keys on the keyboard, very hot button so that you hit it and it does certain things for you. There's a way to program in there. There's ways for dates to come in. Sometimes when you're writing checks, you can have the last check date pop up, or you can have the current check. Just dates. There's all sorts of preferences, there's a calculator, and there's menus that allows you to pick and choose, drop down various alternatives for you in that regard. One of the things that happens in business is that you need to merge two accounts. What happens is you will have one account, and then all of a sudden, I'll give you an example. If you have a credit card and God forbid, but somebody does fraud on it, they'll close one account and issue another one. Well, you want to merge that old account transactions with the new account transactions. So there's a way of doing that. It's pretty straightforward, just a matter of using the item number for the account. Collection letters, if people aren't paying you, there's some built in there. I know nobody likes to use that because, it's hard to beat up those that are paying you, but sometimes it's necessary. There's the notepad. There's wonderful graphs, very picturesque for those who like the color look. Using the register is important, closing your books. All of that happens at the end of the year. There's procedures and capabilities to do both, to use the register and to close the books. The notepad is very useful. You just put down notes. You talk to Joe Blow. In this case, Brian Cook. You can put down the date, what you actually said, and how it actually happened, and that just works out well. This is just an example of some of the graphs. One of the things that that's so useful, if you look at this Rock Castle Construction Company, here's October, November, and December, and it gives you a whole legend to have color-coded the various activities that you're looking at. The income in this particular case is in the bright chartreuse green, and the expenses is in the cardinal, what I'm calling cardinal red. So in this month, the expenses actually exceeded the revenues. Here they were even. Here we really did a good job and revenues were much higher. It also gives you an expense summary of how the expenses break out for the $127,000 worth of expenses. It itemizes where each came from and gives you a pictorial graphic, a pie chart that actually shows it. Okay? Well, that's pretty much wrapping up